I never thought I'd be the guy who ends up writing something like this, but here I am. My name's Tom, and I've been with my wife, Lisa, for about 8 years now. At first, everything seemed perfect. She was gorgeous, smart, funny. She had this way of making me feel like I was the luckiest guy alive. We built a pretty comfortable life together. Nice house, good jobs, the usual. But over the last year or so, I started noticing things that didn't sit right. Small stuff at first, little lies she told, her phone always being kept close, even when she was in the shower or in another room. At the time, I brushed it off. I figured maybe she was stressed, maybe she was just hiding something minor like a surprise or a gift. But then came the weirdest thing. She started acting distant. She was less interested in sex and more irritable whenever I brought up anything remotely personal. Conversations felt like pulling teeth. She'd snap at me for no reason, say I was being paranoid or that I was overthinking everything. Still, I had this gut feeling that I was missing something, that there was some secret. She was hiding. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I decided to play it smart. I hired a private investigator. I didn't want to accuse her outright without evidence, you know. I needed to know what was really going on. I remember sitting in my office, staring at the bank statement where I just paid the guy, telling myself I was doing this for peace of mind. It wasn't about catching her cheating. It was about knowing the truth, whatever it was. And I was hoping that if there was anything, I'd discover it during the investigation. I thought maybe she was having an affair or at least hiding some kind of secret. I mean, who would cheat on someone like me? I worked hard, I paid the bills, I was loyal. But the signs were too obvious now. She was hiding her phone, lying about where she'd been, and suddenly she was disappearing for hours at a time, claiming it was just work or some stupid girl's night out. Yeah, right. The investigator started feeding me reports that first week. Nothing concrete, just little things, sightings of her at a fancy restaurant with a guy, late-night visits to some hotel, even some blurry pictures from a parking lot. It was enough to make my stomach turn, but I couldn't believe it fully at first because Lisa was so good at spinning stories. She'd say I was imagining things, that I was paranoid, that she was sick of me accusing her of cheating. I wanted to believe her because the truth was hard to swallow, but a part of me knew I couldn't ignore what I was seeing, what I was feeling. I was in deep denial, but the evidence kept piling up. One evening, I decided to confront her. I wanted to hear her fake-ass excuses face to face, see if she'd crack. I remember sitting her down on the couch, tossing the printed reports on the table. Her eyes widened for a second, probably the first time I caught her off guard, and then she sneered, "What's this? You hired a detective. Are you serious, Tom? You've lost your mind." Her tone was sharp, bitter. I pressed her, asking where she's been, who she's been with. She rolled her eyes, lied about everything, claimed she was out with friends, that I was just paranoid, making up stories in my head. She looked at me with this bitchy smirk like I was some idiot for believing any of it. And yet I knew better. I knew there was something she wasn't telling me, something I could see in her eyes but couldn't quite grasp. That moment hit me like a truck. The realization that the woman I loved, the woman I thought was my partner for life, had been lying to my face and screwing around behind my back. It hurt so much I almost couldn't breathe. I felt angry, betrayed, disgusted, more than I'd ever felt in my entire life. This wasn't just about cheating. It was about the fact that she thought she could get away with it, that she could lie her way out of it. I sat there, staring at her, feeling the tears welling up, but I didn't let them fall. I knew I had to think about what to do next, how I was going to handle this disaster. But deep down, I already knew I wouldn't be able to forgive her. Not after this. That night, after she stormed off to bed, I stayed up for hours, staring at the ceiling and replaying everything I'd just learned. I felt numb, like my brain was trying to process a blow that was too big to handle all at once. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I could have been so blind to what was happening right under my nose. The worst part was that she kept lying, kept putting on that fake smile every time I confronted her, acting like everything was fine, like I was the crazy one for questioning her. It made me want to scream. I remember feeling this intense mix of anger and heartbreak. The kind of anger that makes your fists clench and your jaw tighten. I felt betrayed, not just by her but by myself for trusting her so completely. How could I have been so stupid? She had me convinced she loved me, that she was loyal, and I was stupid enough to buy it. And now, here I was, stuck with the reality that my marriage was a lie, that the woman I dedicated so many years to had been playing me all along. The next day, I decided I had to do something. I couldn't just sit around and pretend everything was okay. I thought about confronting her again, but honestly, I was tired of her lies. I needed proof, something concrete that I could hold on to. That's when I reached out to the investigator who had been watching her for a few days. I told him to dig deeper, find out exactly who she was seeing, what she was doing. I paid him extra to get video footage or at least some undeniable proof. I knew this was going to get messy, but I couldn't live in the dark anymore. I had to see the truth with my own eyes. Over the next week, I watched as my suspicions turned into cold, hard facts. The reports came in, clear as day. Lisa was meeting another guy, another man, at that fancy restaurant I'd seen her at. They were having what looked like intimate conversations, touching, laughing like they were the only two people in the world. Then there was the hotel. The investigator caught her sneaking into a room with him. I didn't need more evidence after that. It was all there. My wife, my supposed soulmate, was screwing around with some guy she met at her stupid girls' night out. And the worst part, she was lying to my face, every damn day. I remember feeling so many things at once: rage, heartbreak, disgust. I felt like I'd been sucker punched. She had lied and lied and lied, and I'd been so blinded by love that I let myself ignore everything wrong. I had trusted her, believed in us, and she was out there, screwing someone else, probably thinking I'd never find out. I couldn't believe how stupid I'd been. I'd given her everything: my heart, my trust, my life, and she tossed it all aside for some cheap thrill. I decided I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. The day I found out for sure, I sat her down again. This time I didn't hold anything back. I showed her the photos, the videos. Her face turned bright red when she saw the evidence, but she still tried to deny everything at first. She spun some bullshit about how it was just sex, how it didn't mean anything, how it was just a mistake. I couldn't believe the way she was acting, like she was the victim here. She was so aggressive, so bitchy, throwing tantrums and yelling that I was overreacting, that I was insecure, that I didn't understand her. That's when I lost it. I told her to get the hell out of my house. I told her I was done pretending, that this was just some misunderstanding. I wanted her gone, and I wanted her to know that I saw her true face now. The look she shot me, so full of contempt, made me realize how much I'd been played. She didn't care about me at all. She only cared about her own selfishness. Honestly, I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. I'd never felt so humiliated, so broken. But deep down, I also felt a strange sense of relief. I finally knew the truth, and even if it hurt like hell, at least I could start to move on. After she left that day, I was left in this empty house, feeling like I'd been hit by a wrecking ball. The silence was deafening. For the first time in years, I was truly alone with my thoughts, and they were a mess. I kept going over everything: the betrayal, the lies, her sneering face when she lied to me about being at some girl's night, when in reality she was with that guy. I felt so stupid for trusting her, for giving her the benefit of the doubt for so long. I kept asking myself over and over, how could she do this? How could she betray me so completely? I thought she was my partner, my best friend. And now I saw her for what she really was: a lying, manipulative bitch who had been using me, taking everything I had to offer and throwing it away for some cheap affair. But as much as I was furious and hurt, I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I knew I had to decide what I was going to do next. Do I fight for the marriage? Do I try to forgive her? Or do I cut my losses and move on? Honestly, I was leaning toward the last option, but I needed some time to think. This wasn't a decision I could rush. I needed to process all of it, without her around, without the lies, just me, my thoughts, and this crushing sense of betrayal. I spent the next few days wrestling with my emotions. Some moments I was filled with rage, thinking about how she lied, how she humiliated me, and how she was probably laughing behind my back the whole time. Other moments I felt a deep, aching sadness, like I lost a part of myself. I kept replaying the good times, trying to find some explanation or justification, but there was none. She had made her choice, and it was clear she didn't give a damn about me or our life together. At the same time, I started talking to a few close friends, guys who knew her, and some who knew me. I needed an outside perspective, someone who could tell me what to do, how to handle this mess. A lot of them said I should just cut her loose, that I deserved better, that I shouldn't stay with someone who could lie so easily and cheat so blatantly. Their words echoed in my mind, but part of me still clung to the hope that maybe, somehow, I could salvage what was left of the relationship. Deep down, I knew that was probably just me wanting to believe in fairy tales. One thing I did realize, this wasn't just about her cheating. It was about respect, trust, and self-worth. The fact that she could lie to my face, cheat, and then act like I was overreacting made me see how much I'd been devalued. I'd let her walk all over me for too long, and that had to stop. I couldn't keep living in denial, pretending everything was fine when it was. So I decided that I'd confront her one last time, not to fix things, but to tell her exactly what I thought, how I felt, what she did to me, and why she destroyed what we had. But even as I planned that confrontation, I knew I had to prepare myself for the worst, because betrayal like this leaves scars, and no matter how much I wanted to believe she'd come back and apologize, I also knew she probably wouldn't. She was selfish, manipulative, and she'd lied so much that I didn't know if I could ever trust her again, even if she begged for forgiveness. Still, I owed it to myself to say my piece, to finally confront her with everything I'd been feeling. It was the only way I'd be able to move forward, whether that meant rebuilding or ending things for good. The day I decided I'd confront her again, I felt like I was walking into a battlefield. I knew she'd probably be defensive, maybe even angry. That bitchy attitude she always had when she was caught in a lie was going to come out full force. I wasn't really expecting an apology. Honestly, I didn't care if she admitted everything or not. I just wanted to lay it all out, tell her exactly how much she'd hurt me, how betrayed I felt, and how I saw her for what she truly was now. When she came back to the house that evening, her face was smug, like she already knew she'd won something. I didn't hold back. I threw all the evidence on the table again, photos, videos, my own words, and stared her straight in the eyes. I told her how I knew about the affair, how she'd been lying to me for months, how she thought she could hide it forever. Her reaction was classic. She rolled her eyes, scoffed, and said I was overreacting, that I was paranoid, that I was just jealous. She even tried to turn the tables, accusing me of being controlling and insecure. That's when I snapped. I told her that she was the one who had been controlling, manipulative, and unfaithful, that I'd been nothing but loyal, and that her lies had shattered everything. I told her I didn't want a liar or a cheater for a wife, that I deserved someone who respected me, who loved me enough not to screw around behind my back. I saw her trying to defend herself, trying to spin this around like I was the bad guy. But I wasn't having any of it. I told her she had no right to act innocent, no right to call herself my wife when she'd been sleeping around, lying every step of the way. Her face turned red with anger. She shrieked, called me insecure, accused me of spying on her, and said I was ruining everything. Honestly, I'd never seen her like that, so bitchy, so aggressive. She was lashing out because she knew she had no more cover, no more lies to hide behind. I just stood there, calm but furious, telling her that I had all the proof I needed and that she was done. I told her I wanted her out, that I was done being played for a fool. I told her I didn't want to see her face again unless she was genuinely sorry, which I knew she'd never be. As she packed her bags and stormed out, I felt a strange mix of relief and heartbreak. Relief because I finally saw her for what she was, a user, a liar, a manipulator. Heartbreak because the woman I'd loved and trusted, the woman I thought was my forever, had turned out to be someone so cold and selfish. I wondered how I had been so blind, how I let her lie to me for so long. I kept replaying everything, feeling this ache deep in my chest. I'd lost my wife, my partner, my best friend. And even though I knew I had to let her go, it still hurt like hell. That night I sat alone in the quiet house, feeling everything, anger, sadness, a strange sense of closure. I knew this was the end of a chapter I never wanted to close, but I also knew it was the beginning of something new for me. I realized I had to start rebuilding my life piece by piece. I had to find a way to trust again, to heal from this betrayal. And most of all, I had to remember that I deserved better than a wife who could lie and cheat and then turn around and blame me for her own mistakes. That realization hit me hardest, that I'd been so naive, but now I finally saw the truth. And somehow I knew I'd be okay in the end. The days that followed were the hardest I've ever experienced. After she left, the house was eerily silent, and every corner seemed to whisper reminders of what had been lost. I'd never felt so alone in my life. It was like my entire world had been turned upside down overnight. I stayed in bed longer than I should have, binge-watched old movies, and avoided dealing with the reality of it all. But deep down, I knew I couldn't hide forever. I had to make a decision, whether to fight for the marriage or accept that it was over. I spent hours pondering what had gone wrong. I kept thinking about her bitchy attitude, how she'd lied without remorse, how she'd manipulated me into thinking everything was okay when it was. The betrayal cut so deep I couldn't even describe it. I'd been so blind, so trusting, and now I felt like a fool. I realized I'd been giving her everything, my love, my time, my money, and she'd been using me for her own pleasure. The rage I felt kept boiling inside me, and I knew I had to channel it somewhere productive. That's when I started thinking about revenge. Not just to hurt her, but to make her see what she threw away, to remind her that actions have consequences. I wanted her to feel the same pain I felt, the humiliation of being lied to, cheated on, and discarded. I wasn't naive enough to think I could fix what was broken. I just wanted her to understand how badly she'd screwed up. So I devised a plan, one that would hit her where it hurt, but also give me some sense of control in this chaos. First, I made sure I kept all the evidence I'd gathered, photos, videos, her messages with that guy. I wanted to be ready if I decided to take legal action or confront her again. I didn't trust her anymore, but I knew I had to be smart. I also started looking into ways to cut her out of my financial life. I canceled joint accounts, changed passwords, made sure she couldn't access anything that belonged to me. I wanted her to feel the loss, to see that I wasn't going to be some pushover who let her get away with everything. Meanwhile, I was also working on myself. I started hitting the gym, trying to rebuild my confidence. I reached out to friends more often, talked to a therapist, and began to accept that, yes, I'd been betrayed, but I was still alive. I was still standing. The worst part about cheating, I realized, is how it shatters your trust in everything: your partner, your instincts, your own judgment. But I knew I had to rebuild that trust, first in myself, then maybe in someone else someday. One day, I finally decided I'd confront her again. Not to beg or plead, but to deliver the truth I'd been holding inside. I wanted her to know that I knew everything, that I wasn't going to take her bullshit anymore. She'd already shown her true colors: bitchy, manipulative, selfish. And I wanted her to see that I wasn't some naive fool anymore. I'd become someone stronger, someone who refused to be played or lied to. I wanted her to understand that her lies had consequences, that she'd burned her bridges with me for good. When she came back to pick up some of her stuff, I was calm, calmer than I'd ever been. I looked her straight in the eyes and told her she could go, but I'd be damned if I'd let her ruin me anymore. I handed her a box of her things, watched her trying to act like she was the victim, and just shook my head. I told her I knew everything: her lies, her cheating, her manipulations, and that she'd lost her chance with me. That I'd be moving on and she'd better do the same. Her bitchy smirk faded a little, replaced by a flicker of guilt or maybe just realization. Either way, I didn't care. I'd done what I needed to do. I'd finally taken control of my life again. That night I sat alone, feeling a strange mixture of relief and sadness, but mostly relief. I knew I survived, that I'd come out stronger. I'd lost a wife, but I'd gained clarity. I'd learned that trust is fragile and that some people, like Lisa, are only out for themselves. I'd learned not to ignore the signs, not to make excuses for betrayal. And I'd learned that revenge in its own way can be cathartic, if only to remind you that you're still standing. That's all I really wanted, to stand tall again, even if she was gone. I'd move forward, battered but wiser, and maybe someday find someone who values me for who I am, not for what I can give or what secrets I hide. Months passed since she left, And honestly, it took me a long time to start feeling like myself again. The house was still too quiet, too empty, but I forced myself to get back to routine. I reconnected with friends more seriously, took up new hobbies, and even started dating again, though I was cautious. Still, every so often, I'd catch myself thinking about Lisa, how she lied, manipulated, and thought she could get away with everything. I'd look back and realize how much I had let slide, how much I'd put up with because I loved her. But here's what I've learned from all this. Trust can be broken in seconds, but rebuilding it takes a lifetime, and sometimes it's better not to try. I've come to accept that some betrayals run so deep that forgiveness isn't really an option. The pain, the anger, the disappointment, they don't just fade away overnight. You have to live with them, carry them, and use them to become stronger. I'm not saying I'm fully healed, that's a process, but I am definitely in a better place now. I refuse to let her define me, to let her betrayal control my future. Looking back, I realize I was naive to think that love alone could keep a marriage alive. Love isn't enough if there's no honesty, no respect. If your partner's willing to lie and cheat, then what's left? Feelings can fade, trust can be shattered, and the foundation of your relationship can crumble. I wish I'd seen the signs sooner, but I also know now that sometimes life gives you these brutal lessons so you don't make the same mistakes again. I've learned to listen to my gut, to value myself more, and to never ignore the red flags. I don't hold resentment toward her anymore. Honestly, I feel pity for her inability to be honest, for her shallow attempts at keeping her secrets. I hope she finds whatever she's looking for, but I know I'll never look back in regret. I've moved on, not just because I want to forget her, but because I deserve better. I deserve someone who loves me, respects me, and isn't constantly hiding things behind a bitchy facade. And for anyone out there going through something similar, trust me, you're not alone. It hurts like hell and it feels like your world is ending. But time does heal and you find your strength in the process. Don't let betrayal define you. Learn from it, grow from it, and most importantly, never settle for someone who doesn't value you. Because in the end, the only person worth trusting completely is yourself. And once you accept that, you start to rebuild a life that's truly yours again.